My daughter was in third grade and she hadn't learned to read yet. The school team sat me down gently, carefully, and explained that they thought she might have a learning disability, that they wanted to start an evaluation process, that there was a parent questionnaire I would need to fill out. I took it home. I sat down with it. I started reading through the questions, and somewhere in the middle of that questionnaire, I stopped thinking about my daughter because every single question, every single one was describing me. That was my first diagnosis. I didn't get an official one that day, but sitting at that table filling out forms about my sweet 8-year-old, I understood something about myself for the first time that I'd been trying to explain and failing to explain and blaming myself for my entire adult life. I'll tell you a little bit about what my life looked like at that point so you understand what I was working with. I was a single mother. I was putting myself through college. I was working 2 jobs. I was raising my daughter alone, and I was doing what you do when you have no other option. I was managing, mostly. I could hold 10 restaurant orders in my head simultaneously. At work, I could get into a flow state that felt almost supernatural, tracking everything, forgetting nothing, utterly present and utterly capable. I was good at my job, really good. I could even carry 10 full dinner plates at once. And then I would go home and sit down to study, and my brain would simply refuse to cooperate. The words on the page made no impression. The material wouldn't stick. I could not make myself focus on something I found unstimulating, no matter how high the stakes were, no matter how much I needed to pass that test. I told myself I was lazy. I told myself I lacked discipline. I told myself that other people managed to study while working 2 jobs and raising children, and the fact that I couldn't was a personal failure, a character flaw, evidence of something fundamentally inadequate about me. The questionnaire said something different. So here is a story I've never told publicly before, and I'm telling it now because I think some of you need to hear it. In my 20s, while I was putting myself through school and raising my daughter, I had my power turned off. Not once, more than once, many different times. I would come home from a shift, pick up my daughter from daycare, walk to the front door, and there would be that bright orange tag hanging from the door handle. The one that meant the electricity had been cut off. The house was dark, cold, no hot water for a bath, no way to cook dinner. We would make do for the night, figure it out the way you figure out things when you have no choice. And the next day I would get the bill paid and the power turned back on. But here's the part that still stings a little even now. It was not about money. I had the money. I just didn't pay the bill. I forgot. The bill came and, I put it somewhere, and then it ceased to exist in my mind until I was standing in a dark hallway with a tired child on my hip. Bills, doctor's appointments, parent-teacher conferences, vitamins. What I was supposed to be studying for the test on Thursday, they just all vanished. All of it would just vanish. And every time it happened, I added it to the evidence, the long, accumulating, damning evidence that I was someone who couldn't get it together. That I was failing my daughter, that I was failing myself, that I was, and this is the word I use, the word I genuinely believed, that I was a mess. I was not a mess. I had ADHD and I didn't know it yet. About 15 years after that questionnaire, my son was diagnosed. And by then, I was pretty sure I knew what that meant for me, too. I'd been carrying the question for a decade and a half, picking it up, putting it down, wondering, recognizing, dismissing, wondering again. And then I was diagnosed. It was simultaneously a relief and a crushing blow. Relief, because there was finally a name for it, because the name meant it was real and measurable and not simply a verdict on my character. Because I could stop solving the wrong problem. Crushing because I sat with the weight of all those years, all those orange tags, all those tests I barely scraped through, all those nights I called myself lazy, called myself undisciplined, called myself a failure in so many categories that I'd lost count. I'd felt like a loser for so long, decades and decades of that. In the days after the diagnosis, I kept coming back to one thing. If I had a brain that was genuinely neurologically wired to struggle with administrative tasks, with bills and appointments and sustained focus on things that didn't stimulate me, then I was not a lazy person. I was not a person without discipline. I was not someone who simply couldn't be bothered to try harder. I had spent so long telling myself that story, the one where the failings were entirely my fault, where the right answer was always just more effort, more willpower, more self-control. And I had tried. I had tried so hard and for so long that trying hard had become invisible to me. It just became the baseline cost of existing. The diagnosis didn't erase those years, but it did something important. It reframed them. It was not a failure of character. 6 words that changed the way I understood my entire adult life. It was not a failure of character. I'm telling you all of this because I know that I am not the only one. There is an entire generation of women who've been carrying this weight, who were told they were too scattered, too disorganized, too much, not enough. We all built brilliant, functioning lives around brains that we didn't understand at enormous personal cost without ever getting the explanation we deserved. Women who had their power cut off and called themselves failures. Women who could hold everything together at work and fall apart at home and couldn't explain the gap. Women who were sharp and capable and competent and utterly baffled by why everything had to be so hard. This series is for those women. Over the next 9 episodes, we're going to go deep into what ADHD actually looks like in women at this stage of life. The ADHD tax, masking, hyperfocus, what it does to the body, to relationships, to money, what actually helps, not the advice written for 22-year-olds, but what genuinely works for a brain like ours, in a life like ours at this moment. And we're going to talk about what comes next, because understanding your brain at 50 is not too late. It is, I would argue, exactly the right time. If any part of this felt like I was describing your life, stay. Subscribe if you haven't. Come back next Thursday. And if you're somewhere in the middle of your own process, wondering, waiting, not sure yet, come find me on Substack. The link is below. I write the longer version of all of this, and you are more than welcome there. We are just getting started. Share this with the women who needed to hear it 20 years ago. I'm Sarah Jane, and this is the Midlife Intelligencer.